the first thing is to understand your sphere of influence. I think that's an important thing. I mean, the question is, how do you start a D&I program, as an individual contributor, as a new employee or an early career professional, or whatever your situation is. But understand your sphere of influence, and most people tend to kind of underestimate that. They have bigger abilities to influence than they think. So push yourself a little bit, and then try and influence where you have credibility, and understand your credibility. If you are a top performer, you've been there for a few years and you're a top performer, maybe you're a manager, your sphere of influence is quite a bit bigger. But if you're just starting, and you're maybe not the top performer, but you're doing well, then you have another sphere of influence. So understand what that is, and then assess that area and see who are your stakeholders. If your company is a fairly progressive company and has got a D&I leader, chances are you could have a conversation with that person, and just let them know you're here, you want to help. But figure out who the stakeholders are. A D&I leader would be a stakeholder. Your manager would be certainly a stakeholder. And then look at what the opportunities are. Do they have any kind of programs going? What is the culture like? And once you kind of make that assessment, you'll be able to target your influences. You're influencing a lot better. And so first one is kind of understand your sphere of influence. Second one is assess the situation. Third one is lead with the business case, and then the altruism. Okay. And what I mean by that is that establish that your goal is the corporation's goal of good performance as a company. And as she wrote in the introduction, there is a lot of great data out there that talks about how much better companies perform when they have diversity and inclusion oriented cultures. You get more performance out of individuals, you get more engagement, you get faster decisions, you get better decisions, and understand that business case and approach with that, and then follow with, and this is an and, don't leave it out, but the altruism. It's the right thing to do for the people. It's the right thing to do for the employees' families. It's the right thing to do for the community. So there's lots of online research out there. One of the ones that I really like is called Open for Business. And they do an awful lot of great reporting on how communities benefit from D&I, inclusive environments. And then there's a lot of the major consultant companies that put reports out that you can often get a hold of. Be a model of inclusive leadership. If you're an individual contributor, make sure you treat all of your peers in an inclusive way. And the last thing is, I call it being patient, persistent, and broad. And what I mean by that is it takes time, and don't get mad, don't get impatient. At the same time, don't give up. Some people hear me talk about a pleasant pest. You're always there. You're always kind of saying, we can do more, we can do more. And then do it in a broad way. Don't just focus on your community. Understand that diversity and inclusion has many, many dimensions, and do what you can to support the communities that maybe aren't your own. It might be women, it might be people with different abilities, it might be religion, it might be caste. All of those are areas where if you focus on, you'll actually gain more credibility. It's like you're not just promoting your own agenda. You might be an expert on what your community needs, but if you're promoting all of the other areas as well, then it's like you're after the business results. You're not just promoting your own needs.
Interesting. That I would agree with, because I realized in my previous organization, probably I wasn't very patient. I used to get very irritated that there is so much I want to do, and why aren't they agreeing? Why aren't they ready to do it? And I think I lost patience after a point of time, and I just did not want to do anything more. I was like, I'm trying my best to do things, but I'm not getting a great response. So I think I should have been a little more patient with them. Yeah, you have to be patient, but also at the same time you have to be persistent. You have to keep following up. That I did realize. June, if you would like to add.
So I have a few points too that I wanted to share. So first thing I wanted to talk about is if any organization, especially new organizations, can take two broad approaches. One is stay on top of the legalities around LGBTQ inclusion at workplaces. So there are a lot of laws, there are a lot of rulings in place which work in the community's favor, and then there are a lot which don't work in the community's favor. For example, the ruling of self-identification is a huge win for us, but simultaneously there is no ruling on a trans person or a person from the community getting any kind of leeway for incomplete documentation or for an incomplete degree. Now that's a lack of ruling. So what we can do as individuals and organization is play them to our benefit. So as long as nothing is a rule is not written on stone, individual capacities can be practiced within my. So let's say, for example, if I'm talking about a reservation for people from the community, while it might not be a ruling of the land, at an individual capacity you are not held back from having a 2% seat in your company, in your organization, for people from the community. So looking at things first in terms of what are the ways that the government is allowing us to practice our our best ways forward, and what are the ways in which, without being asked to, can I go ahead as an individual and make those changes in my own area. It is not important for me to exactly do what is being ruled out. I can go over and beyond that as well, check with the legalities, and if it is something that is not going to be a problem for the organization, there's a lot of room to be inclusive within one's company. So a couple of things that I was thinking that companies could do. One is that I believe personally is that inclusion and diversity has to work from top down, unlike a lot of changes. What the leader sets as the environment of the company, the employees will eventually learn to behave in accordance with that. If it is a tolerant place which allows misbehavior, the employees will go ahead with that, and vice versa. So it has to be a top-down effort. And in that aspect, there is a lot that decision makers and especially people in human resources can do. For example, your joining forms could be gender and sexual orientation neutral. So just simple example of, if you are joining a company and if you have an insurance, I should be able to have an option to select anybody as my nominee. It doesn't have to be a relative by blood or marriage. Like I talked about having an internal reservation of seats for the community. So you can put aside 2% of your capacity at work that you will only pointedly employ people from the community for. Um, Another very important thing that can be done is inclusion of gender identities can be a part of the induction program. So from the get-go, from day one, every employee understands what is the pulse of this company, is that it is not tolerant of any kind of homophobia or transphobia. So that kind of becomes a part of the work culture in itself. Um, I strongly believe that funds is a big concern, especially right now, especially. So I think we should shift our focus to what can be done with minimum or no funds. So things like making changes in your induction program, turning all your forms into inclusive options. Offering things like leeway in terms of incomplete education or lack of proper documentation. Internally, the organization can make that better judgment of allowing them that room. Uh, Inserting factors into the posh rules of the company. These are all things that we do not require a heavy budget to be done. But changing the language in posh in the company, that what is the identification of a perpetrator and a victim or a survivor. So these are little things that can be done within. A very good way to do that would be to, at a very personal level, connect with someone who is working in the field and ask them, what are the things I can do if my kitty is empty of funds right now? What are the things that I can contribute to this? Another very important thing that companies should immediately start doing is following the NALSA judgment. And as I was telling you and Dwight earlier on the call, following the very late but welcome judgment of September 30th of the Transgender Persons Protection Bill, and actually, like live up to that ruling. It's a great win for us. Not depend your employment standards based on gender identification requirements of any kind. Self-identification of gender is as of today, is the way the community is allowed to move ahead, and that is in itself, especially in my personal work, I see that cropping up over and over again. People are asked for their gender identity certificate, they are asked for their surgery documentation, they are asked for a doctor's or a psychiatrist's certification. All of that is no longer needed at all. We can include an LGBT person in the company with the same employment rules as we can anybody else. So that is something I feel should go very deep down in the understanding of especially the HR of the company.
Okay, definitely, I agree, because even in my previous organization, when I checked the POSH policy that you just mentioned, it clearly said that if a woman is facing this, they can do this. If a woman is going through all of this, they can complain here. And
Yes.
I used to think, what do? I do not identify as a woman. What if I am facing all of that? That's
Yes.
my simple question. And when I raised this concern, they're like, oh, it's all equal opportunity. And as per the law, and that's what they said, that as per the law of India, all the organizations are supposed to have this policy that they protect women. The organizations can go above and beyond the law and include other genders as well.
Yes.
Apparently, as per the Indian law, you have to protect women first, and if you want to be more inclusive, you can add the other genders.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to the laws of India, the best way to go forward is to find loopholes in it.
Definitely, yeah. Neelam, would you like to add here? I think we'd like to listen from you as well.
Yeah, no, so I think very systematically, both June and Dwight have given great points. I can tell you more from a personal standpoint. As an ally, someone who started off her journey, I came from a corporate background. I was working as a financial analyst. And that's where my understanding about the LGBTQ community first started. So the company gave me that exposure, but I realized a lot of it was self-driven. When I look back now, I realize that a lot of it came to me because I actually reached out for it. I actually tried to understand. I actually tried to sort of, do something, create some sort of a momentum around it. And I just want to share that experience because I feel that for some of us who are just starting off and we're trying to figure out how to navigate through the corporate, I feel these things have helped me. First was just utilizing sort of the resources that were at the disposal. Goldman as a company has had a long-standing, sort of an agenda for D&I inclusion and especially LGBT inclusion. So I do ERG or an access to understanding what people are doing. But for me, I personally wanted to get involved. That was for me, the most important thing. How do I contribute? How do I sort of get involved? So I think the first thing that I actually did was ensure that I'm attending as many events, whether it was volunteering, whether it was a simple call, whatever possible that was happening in the organization. I involved myself because I was absolutely ignorant. and that's a bad thing as an ally. You cannot not be aware of the basics. You should be hearing from the community members themselves, and that's how your journey begins. So I think that was number one for me, just listening, engaging, not trying to stand out and be, okay, here I'm an ally, I'm a supporter, follow me. Not that approach, but actually taking a step back and listening as much as possible. The second thing was trying to find out things where the work is happening and how I can contribute. So I remember we had this analyst impact fund, which was a competition for all the analysts to sort of pitch in a social idea. And if your idea was good enough, then the company would take it up and actually fund it and invest in that social cause. So while most of the people, analysts, were pitching ideas of, like, say, cancer patients and helping them, or women related empowerment things, for me it was about, okay, now here's an opportunity where I can actually involve inclusion of especially transgender people. So what I'm doing with Periphery now is actually a byproduct from that competition, where I pitched saying that we should be focusing on training, employment. I reached out to Shubha from Solidarity, and I told her, hey Shubha, I'm doing something like this, I have no idea, and I want to pitch this in, I want to pitch it to the company and see where it goes. That was a great learning experience, because I wanted to implement some of the work, and Shubha was a huge support in creating that proposal and being that support organization over there. So that's one thing that helped, because I was just utilizing what the company already had. I wasn't trying to sort of create new things, which I know would be even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the third and the most important thing for me was just self-awareness of what I'm interested in, because even within DNI and LGBT inclusion, you can be doing so many things. You can be an advocate, you can be someone who's great at learning and development, so you can talk about it, you can conduct trainings, you can be a creative person who creates designs and sort of spreads messages, or you can be someone who's interested in financial independence. So I was that person, and I wanted to actually promote training and employment from day one. I wanted to actually see folks coming in and getting jobs. So I realized that that was my interest, and because I was so interested in it, I would actually never lose a chance to tap into that wherever possible. So I feel it was a combination of understanding what my company already had, understanding what I'm good at, and then using whatever was available to just plug things. And I feel those things have really helped me, because it helped me understand myself, and then I could also support the community better. So that's how the journey has been.
Interesting. June, I had a question from you for you when you were talking about reservation. Would you suggest that an organization hire a person from the LGBT community, even though he might be a slightly lesser talented person as compared to a heterosexual who would be a better fit, just so that the organization is trying to be more inclusive? Would you agree to that point?
So, how I would look at it is, let's say I'm a 100 people company and I'm setting aside 2 seats for people from the community. So,
Yeah.
with the 98 people in my company, I can stick to all my hiring, requirements, etc. For the 2 people, one of the 2 things can be done. One is, if you do have, luckily, the kind of budget to put them in a training period where let's say your salary is 100 rupees, and you pay them a part of the salary during the training period of a month or 45 days, whatever. And you pay them a training stipend, or you pay them some kind of a compensation for it. And then you integrate them into the system. That's one way of looking at it. The other way could be that the 2% of the seats could be reserved for any position, any opening within the organization, so that whoever is coming on board, I am able to find a fit much quicker and easily. So that could be something that a company that is new or a company that is starting to collect funds could look at doing as well. Does that answer your question though?
Yeah, definitely. So
Actually, to
also,
add on to it,
yeah,
I feel like companies really need to look at hiring for attitude, because there are so many people who may not have, and this is not just restricted to the community, even outside, so many people who are skilled, who are talented, but may not have had that exposure, may not have had that particular, I don't know C++, but I have such great analytical skills. I can learn C++ in a couple of months.
yeah,
So companies really need to understand if that person has that aptitude and that attitude, and be willing to invest, because you're investing in someone who has the capability, and you're going to reap so much more from that person. So, just working
Yeah.
around that and not being rigid about, okay, I need to hire a graduate, I need to hire from IIM. I don't think those things really work as much anymore. Yeah.
Definitely. Dwight, you want to add?
Sure. I agree so completely. I think that what has happened, and Ashish, you can probably see this in your role as a recruiter, is that it's very hard to make decisions around hiring. You know, you have, and especially today, we're just tons of data out there. And so companies tend to want to make it easy. They want to make it look fair. And so they go on the hard things. You know, they tend to, because that's the easier way to kind of say, well, they tested better, or they, they excelled better, they had more experience in this skill. And I would argue that that's a real short-term business perspective. That if you think about it much more strategically, you realize that diversity is about bringing in very different points of view and very different skill sets. As Neelan talked about, is that somebody who maybe doesn't code C++ as well as someone else, but has a great attitude and comes from a different community and can give visible diversity to the organization, they're going to inspire other people. There's if it's I think you talk about the visibility of LGBT people. There's tons of other minority groups that look at the treatment of LGBT people in an organization as a bellwether, of whether or not they feel like it's going to be inclusive and a good environment for women, for people with disabilities. And so if you think about hiring strategically, giving up on these easy things and looking for the harder things and the less tangible things becomes much more important.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. I also wanted to ask probably how important is an employee resource group in an organization? And we also mostly see always big corporates and big organizations doing steps. What is something like a smaller organization with 10, 15 people? What do they do at their levels? How do they be more inclusive? Should they form an employee resource group? So if anyone of you would like to share on that.
All right, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. I've had the great privilege of leading several LGBT employee resource groups in large organizations. Yeah. And I would say that in a small organization, it may not be an LGBT ERG. It might be a diversity council. Okay. It might not even have that formal name. It's just if there's 15 of you, there's 2 of you that are passionate about diversity. You informally meet have lunch every so often with the CEO and talk about, we can get more performance from people. We can get better decisions with this. And help them do their job by incorporating more diversity and inclusion. If you're a little bit bigger, then maybe you do form an ERG. I think it's very important to think about what is the purpose of ERGs. We talk about, there's kind of several levels of ERGs. There's some companies who want to say they have an ERG on their website because it looks good to potential suppliers and customers, but they're really scared of ERGs because the ERG becomes a give me environment. It's like they meet together and say, give me, give me, give me. And that's the last thing HR wants, because they have so many people asking for stuff. So, you can move up that scale and make your ERG be something that contributes to the business. At the low end, you can do events, you can do inclusion events, you can reach out, do the community. At the high end, you become a strategic representation of a customer base, or you become an organization that influences hiring, and so focus where you can on the business imperative, and bring the altruistic way along with it, but work to make that business better and however you can, and work to bring diversity and inclusion in, so because of its business impact.
Okay, understood. June, Neelam, if you want to add probably how to start an ERG. If I join an organization that does not have an ERG, what should I do to probably start the conversation, get people together?
I also want to pick from what Dwight and Neelam both said. So, like he said, if it's a smaller company, we need not have even a label of an ERG. What we can have is one dedicated person or two dedicated people. And like Neelam said, the good news is that it's all about wanting to, knowing the process of it. There are a lot of people out there who will be very happy to help you create that space, to help you put together that little support group. So it is absolutely not necessary to have a dedicated ERG, as long as even one person or two people are setting aside a small fraction of their time to do this work. That in itself should be enough. Very, very small steps can be taken, which will have huge impact in the curve of the company later. The initial things which I was talking about, including inclusion in the induction process, having a person who is reaching out to someone who is working on the ground, or someone who is associated with people who are working on the ground. So keeping that channel of education open and just having the right intent. It can be as big as literally one person as well.
Interesting. Neelam, if
Yeah.
you, yeah.
I find that very interesting what you just said, that, an ERG, when we think about it, it's like, okay, so many people coming together and so much work happening.
We
But
call it an
like,
employee resource group, so people just assume that it should be a group of people.
yeah, no, but in fact, so many organizations that we work with, and it just strikes me now that they started off with two people, one person being, okay, I want to do this, and they were just riding through it for 6 months, 1 year, and then they found some traction. So, yeah, I think that's a great point. I think for smaller organizations, it's just as simple as, I don't feel like it needs a structure as such. The whole point of an ERG is that it ensures safety, and it's ensuring that it's a safe space. We need to keep those two things really in mind, because you're calling someone, you're calling yourself or the group as a safe space for the community. So you need to put those guidelines in place, whether you're a small or a large organization. Maybe folks are coming out over there, but for them also to come out and actually be themselves, you need to create that environment of safety and security. So I just working through guidelines and actually showcasing those guidelines, having that intent of keeping people's information confidential. How do you ensure that this is going to be done in a most regulated manner possible? Even if you're just hosting like a catch up at a cafe, how do you ensure that the cafe and the people who turned up over there, their identities are not being explicitly put out? And giving that confidence to people that it is a safe group, because when people come together, magic automatically happens. So I think the biggest thing is to like get the people together, make them feel safe. And I mean, there's no limit to it. And there are pride events that just happen in public spaces. We can be a part of, and drive so many more. Like recently we did this podcast with GE, and because they're just actually sort of working this and they're trying to push things ahead. So it was interesting to see that, they were happy to just release podcasts for now, because that itself is good amount of information going on. So not G, this is Schneider. So yeah, I feel there are various ways you can work around it. But yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Very valid points. I also wanted to check. So what I've noticed with the previous two organizations, the two organizations that I've worked with, we do get allies to come for these meetings, but people from the community itself do not feel okay coming for an LGBT event. They're like, oh, if I come, people will find out I am gay. How do you encourage people from the community to come for these events? Because I used to know so many people and I used to get disappointed that why are these people not coming up? we need a lot more participation. I was doing sensitization sessions, and there were barely 3 or 4 allies coming up, and no one from the community showed up. So how do you encourage people from the community to come for these events where they feel okay and they don't have to come out, or they feel comfortable? How do you make them feel comfortable about coming to these events?
I'm going to jump in for this one.
Okay.
So allow me a little time here.
Sure.
I feel that one has to look at the oppressor and oppressed structure in this situation. So now I have a person from the community. I have a person from the community who's out, and I have a person from the community who's not out. So even within the community, there's a clear power structure that is playing out.
Yeah.
And the entire agenda of creating ERGs or creating safe spaces, if you look at it in a very business oriented way, the community is your customer. They are the client. And everyone outside of the community are the workers. They are the ones who will have to meet, be visible time and again, over and over, over and over, over and over, till the message that this is a safe space naturally percolates to the community members' mind. Because number one, people are not comfortable being outed until they are absolutely sure of the safety of the space. A lot of people are, even they're not comfortable with coming out, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But I personally feel that if it is a rainbow event or if it is an ERG event, I'll be very happy if not a single person in the room is gay other than me. I'll be very happy about that, because they are my client. I don't need to talk to them. I don't need to request them for their presence as a mandatory for this event. If they join, great. If they want to, that's amazing. But allowing that natural progression of them finding that safety in this space is very important, I feel.
Wow, I never thought about that. Interesting. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to check with government policies. Is there anything, probably if I'm getting bullied or I'm getting harassed at work, are there any policies for the LGBT community that protect them as of now?
There is a couple of sections, and there are a couple of rulings even in the TG person protection bill that has come out. It's very dicey though. I would personally recommend not to go with the legalities of it and work on it in your organizational structure. So let's say if there is any harassment or bullying or any form of violence that has taken place, it is not important for me to look at the identity of the survivor or the perpetrator to apply my company rules. So according to my company rules, again, it comes back to POSH. So if my POSH doesn't say it's only for women, I can implement those steps for any identity. So yeah, there are a few chances of filing it legally. It's not very strong. It doesn't move ahead very fast, and you will need at least 3 times more of validation when the perpetrator, or, I'm sorry, when the survivor is from the community. So it's best that it is resolved internally, where of course the maximum that could be is termination for a person, or the least that could be is a warning. That, according to me, would be a much, and the person from the community who is the survivor would also feel a lot more safe if it is handled internally than actually taking it to legal.
Yeah. Because even if they're not out, if they go to court, and it is kind of like coming out to everyone, and they would feel safer if it's handled internally.
Yes, absolutely. And for that, we need to have very strong and inclusive posh rules in the company.
Do you have any tips, even Neelam, Dwight, if you guys want to add in, what are the initial few changes in the POSH policy that need to be made to be more inclusive?
I wouldn't be an expert at that, so I don't want to comment on that. But I feel like with India as a country, and June and Dwight, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here. India as a country has not really recognized LGBT queer people like the larger umbrella. It's only recognized transgender people, trans persons, trans bill, etc. So I feel like, yes, there is some legality and rules around that, but not the larger community at all. So yes, people will will still and can still fight for their rights and can still issue against the people, the criminals itself on the basic account of human rights, but not as an LGB queer person, I feel. So I think that's a sad part, because only the transgender community is actually sort of even recognized by our government as a community itself.
Yeah, Neelam, that's a very valid point, Ashish. Adding to your earlier question that, yeah, there are some rules, but that's pertinent only to the trans community. But the rest of the umbrella is absolutely not covered in that.
But now that we don't, so now that I can self-identify as trans, can people misuse this and be like, okay, I am trans and I want to be covered under this protection law?
I have a very simple solution to that. Well, if you end up taking the job, and a job is half your life, so you're gonna have to live two lives, and you're gonna have to pretend half of that life. So I don't know how many people will be excited about that.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to talk about funds because probably big organizations do have a lot of money. They usually get a D&I consultant and have things. What if, again, a smaller organization cannot afford? And in June, I think you have given valid points. Dwight and Neelam, if you want to add, is it really important to invest, to put in money for a smaller organization that might not be able to afford? Probably they can try a little bit. What is a good amount for them also? I mean, if you guys could throw some light on that.
Sure. So I think that when you talk about success of diversity and inclusion, or of a program, or success of an ERG, there's a lot of factors. Money is just one of those. The key thing is, some other key things are knowledge, passion, the people to do the work, and the strategic thinking, to think about what is being done. So it's not just thinking, you have to do the action as well. And so if you don't have money, then that passion can jump in and do a lot more. And there's tons of things you can do without any money. There's tons of things I can do at my office by, putting a sign up for holidays and recognizing Sign Language Day, recognizing Women's Day, and just making sure that my office is an inclusive place for all the intersectionality. And it doesn't cost any more than a few minutes to come up with what those signs or posters look like. You can have lunch and learns where people bring their own lunch, and you have the passion and you have the education, and it doesn't necessarily cost stuff, and there cost money. And there's tons of people, and Working with Pride, Advisory Collective, and others that are willing to volunteer their time to help you get started. If you invest money and you have money, then sometimes it makes it easier for people to take more time out of their job to do this. I mean, you can get more. So money definitely is important and helpful, but it's one of many things that are important and helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree to Dwight. I think it's the intent. You can have a lot of money, but if you're not putting in the right intent and actually utilizing it, it really does not go anywhere. Even my organization is extremely small, but I've realized that having diverse representation within periphery has helped us so much versus when we started off, when it was very a specific group of people coming together from a specific background trying to solve a very diverse problem. So I think small organizations, it's easier to implement versus instead of thinking that, okay, when we grow big, we will think about this. I think when you start off small and you implement these changes, when you work on these things, when you're 5-member, 10-member, 20-member team, as you grow, it just becomes a part of your DNA. You don't need to work hard to make it something substantial. It's just already there. So yeah, that's just that.
Okay, great. So I think that's all from my side. I don't, I think I've got good enough clarifications. I've got a lot of knowledge from you three as well today. If people on the call, if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask anything to these amazing people who have taught me a lot, who have probably enlightened you as well today.
Hi guys, I'd just like to jump in. First of all, a pleasure listening to all of you guys. Thank you. Um, my question has two parts. One is around the very definition of diversity and inclusion, because a lot of our conversation seemed to revolve around the LGBTQ community. And as someone who is sort of initiating a diversity collective within my own organization, I have been a little concerned about how inclusive is our inclusivity initiative, given that we also have been focusing solely on the LGBTQ community, and other groups such as, or other elements of oppression like caste or disabled people may not have found adequate voice within our so-called diversity collective. That's part one of my question. And the other thing that I wanted to pick your brains on was, as a collective that's very new and which we have formed as after a lot of negotiation and bargaining from the management, who don't really truly, trust us as doing an important job. uh, how do I, what sort of events or initiatives could I take to sort of show proof to them that this is something worth doing, and that in eventually they could also think about putting in real money into doing it, basically making them say their worth, because all that we have been doing so far is just to send out emailers, etc., things that don't take money and have not been uh, very, very effective. Sorry for the long question, but that's what I wanted to know.
Thank you, Alan, for your question. But I think it is a good start. At least starting off sending
Yeah, it's
emails
good.
is good enough, because a lot of organizations are not comfortable doing that as well. They'll be like, we cannot use the word LGBT in an email. We will get some backlash. So even starting off with sending emails is a good start. So that is great. But yeah,
I,
June, Neelam.
what I really feel is sometimes we may want, or we may be looking at other organizations of where they are, but we wouldn't really know how many years they've spent actually getting over there. So maybe the aim should not be about how inclusive it is, because it does take a lot of time for people to understand and for people to actually bring about change within themselves before they can even change the organization. It takes quite some time. So if you really want to measure how inclusive it is, I think uh, one of the best ways is to ensure that the people who are in it are engaging with the community directly. And if you do not have that representation within the group, best is to volunteer with organizations like, say, Solidarity Foundation and so many others that are doing brilliant work. And you get to directly work with the community, understand the experiences, and actually break your own biases and stereotypes. That's the only way I see that people do understand. Otherwise, you will never really be able to actually understand how inclusive it is. And then a lot of other things, like, say, people coming in and actually talking about their stories, whether it's their coming out journey, talking about it, because that sort of gives the confidence to so many others in the organization that, yes, I can be myself. I see somebody else out. And reiteration of those stories, reiteration of people finding safe space wherever they are and talking about it really helps as well.
It's a great question, and thank you for asking it. I think that there's a lot of people that I've watched as start ERGs have the same questions, or business resource groups, whatever you call them, collectives. And so if you look around and you see that they're kind of tolerating you and they don't really trust you, then then I think a key strategy to begin with is to gain that trust, gain that. And so be very careful to frame things in the business impact. And the business impact can be very human with stories about, well, this person feels much more comfortable now. They're able to perform more. They're able to think. They're able to do better at work. So business impact doesn't mean it's only numbers. Business impact is a lot of stories. But if you focus on that business impact, then you gain that trust, and that's how you will get more influence. You know, if they feel like you're really focused not on give me what I want, but rather what can I do for the company? What can these great ideas and policies around diversity and inclusion do for the company? Then you get alignment on the same goal they have, and they'll begin to trust you and support you more, and that will lead eventually to them wanting to empower you by giving you money for you to be able to do more of what you're already doing.
Probably if we're talking about diversity, and we are like today probably we are mostly talking about the LGBT inclusion, but also I do not see people talking about caste or mental health inclusion when they talk about ERGs. Do you have anything to add there? Probably what can organizations do in that space as well?
Okay. What we've really seen with a lot of Indian organizations, so what we've really seen with a lot of Indian organizations is that it's worked this way that, okay, number one, inclusion of women, number two, persons with disabilities, number three, generational diversity, inclusion of people, refugees, etc., etc. Number four, LGBTQ. But what I've heard from some of the stalwarts and some of the most recognized D&I leaders itself is that a company that has actually balanced so many of these together has thrived like nothing, and has aiming for just LGBTQ inclusion while you're actually probably not thinking about generational diversity, or when you're not thinking about women, because a lesbian woman is a woman as well, while her identity can also be from an LGBT standpoint.
Yeah.
So ensuring that you're able to think about various of this instead of one after another, it may be difficult. So which is why it's important to identify people who are passionate about what. And there will be people who will be, say, really interested in working around inclusion of disability. And I think we need to recognize those people and actually have a group of sorts coming together, which later expands into so many other areas.
So how I was going to respond to that is I think that it's helpful to understand the nature of implicit bias, implicit bias is all of us. We actually have to have biases to survive. It's the way our brain creates these automatic decisions that the survival brain of living through thousands of years and surviving thousands of years in a jungle and desert, whatever. We create these biases to make automatic decisions that are very fast. The problem is we don't live in a jungle environment anymore, and so to really lead people and to be able to influence people broadly, we have to manage those biases. And the way that the journey that we tend to take as individuals is we start questioning those biases because of our own personal experience. So I grow up being passionate about LGBT because I had these experiences. But as matured, I kind of start to realize that, women have a lot of the same experiences. Some of the words are different, but that idea that you're less or that you're pigeonholed in a specific way because of some exterior trait that is convenient for a perceived majority is something that is experienced by all these groups. And so I think that the intersectionality, you can't really get to the heart of diversity without looking at intersectionality. You'll stop at women, you'll stop at LGBT, and not really understand that it's all about managing our own internal implicit biases. And once you figure out that it's managing about those internal implicit biases, you start, I can really do a lot better in decision making. Because I'm checking my gut, but I'm checking my gut against the rationality of it. And so I think that you start where you can and you mature where you can. And an important part of that maturity is understanding all of the different dimensions of diversity, understanding implicit bias, and being able to manage yourself and help others manage themselves so that those automatic decisions become much more thoughtful.
Definitely. Even I would like to add something to answer your question, Alan. What I did in Philips with currently I work with Philips, and what I did here was initially I was trying, and I was like, why are they not taking me seriously? I used to feel that way that I want to do so much more, but I'm not being taken seriously. But after some time, they were like, okay, this boy has potential. It took them about 6 to 8 months, and they're like, okay, we can do a lot with this guy. And I myself just randomly made a presentation about gender and sexuality and talking about it at the workplace. Why is this important? And day before yesterday, I had to present it to the CTO of Philips India. There was the HR head, there was the communications head of Philips India. All of them were on the call, and they were surprised that, oh, we didn't know when you talk about biological sex, there are three types of biological sex: male, female, and intersex. We thought gender and sex are the same. And I pointed out simple things what Philips was doing wrong currently, because last week we got a survey form, and in the gender section they just had male and female. And that, just simple things like that, I pointed out that you just need to add one more option there. It's not very difficult. When the leader started the call, he started with, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the call. And I was like, what if someone doesn't identify with ladies and gentlemen? You started off the call with saying ladies and gentlemen. So just point out these simple basic things that probably are very easy to do in their organization, and tell them that, okay, I do have some knowledge, I can try my best to teach, or I'm more than happy to talk about it as well.
Thank you, everyone.
No problem, no problem at all. Though I was very scared. The CTO of Philips India was there, the HR head of India for Philips was there. I was very scared, I was very nervous. But it happened. It took a long time. And as Dwight mentioned earlier, you have to be persistent, you have to be patient. I think that is very true. You have to keep telling that, hey, I can do this, hey, we can do this, we can try this. And luckily, I found three different managers from different HR functions who were also supportive, and they're like, okay, let's do it. Why haven't we done this before? Once you only tell them that, hey, probably we can have a free movie screening, or we can have a session. I can make a presentation for you guys. So just start doing your work yourself and tell them, hey, this can happen, and they will soon enough. They might take some time, as Dwight said, be persistent and be patient. Okay, others, sorry, I just keep going on. Others, if you guys have any questions, please feel free.
Hi, Ashish. I have a question.
Sure, Sanjay.
Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Sanjay, and I work as a D&I consultant. I try and help my partners, in their D&I journey. Now, to be very honest with you, if I look at the D&I journey, from the reactive to the proactive to the integrated to the embedded, truth be told, I think right now India is at a stage where most of the organizations are in a reactive stage. There are very few companies I've worked with, where they've moved from a reactive to a proactive, and maybe very, 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 very few who are actually moving from a proactive to an integrated. I think embedded is a very, very, very long way for us to go, number one. The question that I have for you here is that when I work with my clients, I also need to look at the work culture, the current, what's the culture like in the organization? Are the current employees even ready to have these dialogues? How welcoming are they? Because what happens is that I have partners who tell me, Sanjay, we want to hire PWD people, we want to hire transgenders. And I tell them, no, you're not ready for this. And they're like, come on, everybody else is doing it, and we want to put ourselves on the D&I map. And I hate doing this, but I mean, I have to play the devil's advocate. On one hand, of course, it could be revenue for my firm, but I couldn't care less, because it's also about the job that we need to do. And I think the job that we need to do is first check on the readiness of the organization, check on where are they in their D&I journey. And truth be told, a lot of us are in the reactive stage. We are moving to a proactive stage. So how do we I look at culture study. I look at the vision, mission, values of the organization. I try and get a 90-minute or a 120-minute with the senior leaders, so that I can understand how serious are they about D&I. So these are some of the aspects that I look into even before I agree to sign up with them for building a strategy. DNI is not just LGBTQ, it's not just, PWD, it's not just women. It's about welcoming people's thoughts, ideas, opinions, expressions on a daily basis. I mean, that's the, that's the Ethiopian world or the Ayn Rand philosophy that I'm looking at, idealism, and I'm not going there. But my question is, how do we work with organizations who fail to understand that DNI is not something that you do you do a Pride Month, or you do like a movie screening, and you think that you're there. How do we help organizations understand DNI in the truest sense of the word, inclusion? And what are your thoughts on that?
I can take one piece of it, because I think
Sure.
it in itself is a question that does not have a clear answer or a direct answer. But I feel like no company is ever ready, like never. And like you said, there's just probably 1 or 2% that have sort of embedded. But then we need to have everybody taking this journey up. And I can tell you, like, say, for example, you're looking at integrating transgender persons into your workforce, and a company or a client is coming to you saying, hey, we need to hire people, but overall, it looks like they're not ready. What I've seen with most of the companies is that, and some of them have actually started integrating, and it has worked out beautifully, because some of the pockets were really inclusive. The company as a whole is not, and it may take another 5 years, 10 years also, to be very, very honest. But I feel like a small pocket was ready, and that pocket took the initiative and just became the role model for the organization. So,
Neelam,
yeah.
sorry, I'm just going to play the devil's advocate, but the individual is still not going to be just living in that pocket, right? Because I had this experience with one of my clients where we hired a PWD person, but he came back saying, with my team, everything is great, but when I go to the cafeteria, or when I'm at other, places in the organization, there is a lot of challenges that I go through. So
I agree. I agree.
Sorry.
No, I 100% agree to that. And I feel that that's the reason why you need to, the way I see it is, somebody who's seeking for a job is probably begging for alms, and is probably maybe also forced into sex work. And this person is seeking a life where they can just have decent financial income coming in. Now, this person actually makes a choice for themselves that, hey, do I want to be doing that because X company is not ready? Or can I actually take the chance, enter this organization and see for myself? I see this with a lot of people that we've gotten jobs as well, while their immediate teams, the people around them are super inclusive and, actually mean it from heart. The larger organization is, I'd say, very passive. But has it helped the person? Has it helped the community? Largely. Is it the best case scenario? No. It can be a lot better, but I feel overall, is it worth it? And I think that's a very important question to ask, because Christians are not ready. The community should never be suffering because of that, whichever community for that matter. Yeah, that's all I feel, but I know there are so many ways to look at it.
Yeah. To share my experience with my previous organization as well, I was very persistent. Let's do something. But they would wake up only in June and be like, okay, let's do something now, Ashish. It's Pride Month. And I saw that for 2 years, and I was like, if you're only going to do things with me in June, I clearly know where your heart is. So I don't think I'm very comfortable being here. And that is why I left. And we do see a lot of organizations who are just celebrating Pride Month, and they just mum the whole year round. We need to tell organizations that just doing Pride Month is not okay. We need to have initiatives all year long. Dwight, if you want to add something to Sanjay's answer.
Well, sure. And Sanjay, I really appreciate the question. I think a lot of the data talks about how teams, if teams that are just diverse, but you haven't really prepared them for that, actually don't work as well as teams that are uniform. And so there is engineering, if you will, that has to be done. You have to figure out, in order for it to go be really successful. However, I think that every engineer has to experience, has to experiment. And this goes to, I think, what Neelam was talking about, is that the first people that come out in their company are real risk takers. And that first transgender person that goes into any team and you know, is really a big risk taker. And that PWA, you know, that goes into a team is taking a risk. And lots of times they can lose sight of the fact that even if they end up leaving the company, their very visibility there changed people's minds. You know, and their very visibility there likely, it's never guaranteed, but likely helped them do something different for others. And so it's thinking and it's action. And even if the action is small and the action might not work out perfect the first time, you learn from it and you go.
Sanjay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does throw some interesting points of view and points to view as well. Do I just, you know, I mean, the way I'm looking at it is that you mentioned that we need to look at creating, I mean, either we hope that we have outliers in the organization, or is it that we create an environment so that we can have outliers to actually, you know, take these risks and express themselves, which might then start an interesting journey for the organization.
You know this, I think, as well as everybody else on the panel. You kind of have to assess the situation, and there's no one fixed answer.
Sure.
I do think that, you know, lots of companies, and you've probably experienced this, they start experimenting with a team. You know, I mean, you talk, I think Neelan talked about this earlier, that the organizations are very different within an organization. You know, it's determined by the managers, it's determined by the work they do, who are their customers. And just to take an out LGBT person, just to take a woman and throw her in the middle of, you know, coal shoveling or something, you know, can be high risk, you know, high risk for not working out. So you kind of have to engineer that small group. So I think that there is, quite often I see people saying, well, let's experiment with this group. You know, let's test this group and see what we need to do. The top down is really important, as you know, but learning is about experimenting.
Yeah. So I've noticed we always talk, obviously leadership support is important, top-down approach really works, but does the bottom-top approach work as well? Is that an option that we can try in? The bottom-up approach, can that work?
No, I was just going to say yes. It's all of the above. You know, eventually you've got to get that leadership buy-in, but quite often somebody who's really passionate at the bottom that starts working this out can influence the top. To really make the big bang, you need to have the top, but sometimes the people at the bottom are the ones who get the top.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah.
No, the same thing. I feel like the people who are driving this are the ones who are, other ones who are sort of down the hierarchy chain. So it does come from there. So many times we've seen HR, you know, not even HR partners or HR leaders reaching out, HRs who've just like been 2-3 years into the organizations reaching out, asking us what to do and how to go about things. And they've actually brought in so much more change because of their thought. Like the way Ashish, you've done in Philips right now.
Yeah.
You've influenced the leadership. So, I mean, you've actually put the thought, you planted the seed, and now it's going to come actually top down again.
Yeah.
So I feel that works beautifully because you can see people who are going to implement it. And that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant myself. And so Neelam, this is about transgender people with whom you work so extensively. I wanted to check, like, when you place them, what are the kind of challenges you face from the transgender people themselves and from the organization?
Okay, so I'll start from the community angle, and thanks for asking that,
Right.
Anupama. So I feel first thing is to understand how diverse trans community itself is. I know you know it, and I know our panel obviously knows it, but for the, sorry about the background sound as well, there's some renovation work going on. Yeah, but I mean, it's to understand the diversity of the community within the trans community itself. We're talking about trans men, trans women. We're talking about cultural groups. We're talking about people who come from hijra system, etc. So it's an extremely diverse group of people that we're talking about. So if you're talking and if we're recruiting people from, say, a particular cultural group who may have come from a background of, say, probably begging, sex work, etc., it's very important to understand the community on the ground and what sort of hand holding will they need. Without that, you really can't make this successful because they have their own challenges. Some of the people may still be facing issues from their, from their systems, etc. It's a whole different world in itself. And then obviously there are trans people who had the exposure and who had some bit more privilege than the others. I think integration for them is a bit more easier. I won't say it's just very easy, but it's a bit more easier because they've had the exposure, they've had the education, etc., etc. So I feel it really differs person to person. It differs the different backgrounds that the community is coming from and understanding those backgrounds itself. And I don't think you need to do too much. You don't need to invest a lot in doing that. You just need to understand the people who you're interviewing better. That's one. For companies, I feel no amount of learning is ever sufficient, no matter who you're integrating. Even just the panel itself, if you're integrating me into your organization, I come with my own sets of needs and the things I like, etc. But some of the basics that you need to keep in mind is a gender neutral restroom, or having a culture where a trans person can freely access the restroom in line with their gender identity. I don't really think we should be having gender neutral restrooms, but the whole problem is people may not always understand. A trans woman may not always feel comfortable using a woman's restroom if people around are not so inclusive and understanding. So ensuring you have the restroom in place, that infrastructure is super important. You don't need to construct one. You can also just change the sign, but ensure it's accessible. Don't keep it a kilometer away from your office and then expect the person to be happy about it. Make it accessible for people. Ensuring that people are sensitized, most important. If you do not sensitize the people around, they do not understand the pronouns to use, just the different backgrounds that they're coming from, it makes the integration really difficult. So I feel if companies do 2 or 3 of these basic things, a lot more ahead becomes easier. And I don't see it as rocket science at all. I just feel that companies really hold themselves back because they're like, I want to be perfect. I want to do this really well. But I feel perfection also comes with learning, experimenting, and having the intent to not put the person through anything difficult and just ensuring that you're there for them. That's really important.
Thanks, Neelam. And do people like really stay? Sorry, one more question. Like,
Yes,
so
please
when,
go ahead,
especially those Neelam who come from the like you say hijra community, or who would have done like a begging or sex work, who come from the lower, like from more difficult background amongst the transgender community, how easily do they integrate from there and they integrate into the workplace? Because one is the income differs. They probably would have made more when they were doing begging or in sex work, and then moving, even though they want to move into mainstream employment, but the salary differences or sometimes that perceived sense of discrimination, all those things are also there. So how does that work?
There's a lot of pre-work that actually goes into before you actually integrate that person into the company. And that's something Periphery also realized a very tough way. I know initially when we were placing people from the grassroots of the community, all of our placements failed. All of them did. Like, we couldn't sustain people for more than about 6-7 months. And it was absolute foolishness, but we learned the tough way that we had to put people through a certain amount of training. We had to ensure that they had peers from the community who could be their role models and actually be mentors. They didn't need mentors from outside, but they need mentors from the community. And so right now, that's the reason why we have Revive and mandatory training programs like that. Some of these programs go for about 2 months, some of our trainings for up to 6 months, depending on what the person needs. So without that sort of an integration from our end as service provider, we actually cannot bring that person into any job structure. So, and I feel like when you do that training, you understand the person better, you understand what they need. Will they fit in? Will they be able to make their living? Will they be able to have a great career? And it just makes your job so much more easier. Obviously, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of money that you as an organization will invest. But if you find the right partners, you can also reduce your cost over there. So yeah, those things have helped us, and we've had great retention ever since then. Hardly any dropouts in the last year and a half and 2 years. So I'm super proud because I know, yeah, we had to work that way to actually make it happen.
That's amazing, Neelam. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you all for joining, giving us your time on a Saturday afternoon. It means a lot. And again, do check out our products. Everything is made by the LGBT community. So go shop. Diwali is around the corner. But thank you all. Thanks a lot for joining. And let's make this world a little more diverse and inclusive and better for everyone to live in.
Thank you, Ashish.
Yeah.
Thank you,
you.
Ashish.
Thanks,
Thanks
Neelam.
so much.
Thanks, Joy.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Ashish. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.